The crash. The sky was clear when Lucas's ship entered the atmosphere. But something went wrong. The alarms blared. The ship shook violently as it fell through the sky. Lucas gripped the controls with all his strength, trying to steer the ship. But it was no use. The ship was too damaged, and the ground was coming too fast. He closed his eyes, bracing for impact. The crash hit hard, throwing him against the seat. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then, slowly, Lucas opened his eyes. His head was spinning, and his body ached. He groaned, trying to push himself up. The ship was broken, twisted metal everywhere. Smoke filled the air, and there was the smell of something burning. He wasn't dead. Lucas looked around, trying to make sense of what happened. The ship's controls were destroyed. A glass window was cracked, and the world outside was a blur of green. He grabbed the emergency survival kit from the back seat and crawled out of the wreckage. He stumbled to his feet and looked around. The planet was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering trees stretched high above him, their leaves thick and dark. The ground was soft and covered in thick, wet moss. The air was warm, but it had a strange, almost sour smell. Something was off. It didn't feel safe. Suddenly, Lucas heard a noise, a rustle in the bush. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound came closer, like something was moving through the undergrowth. He quickly crouched down, hiding behind the remains of the ship. His pulse raced as he tried to make out what was coming. The noise stopped. Lucas stayed hidden, holding his breath. His eyes scanned the area, searching for any sign of movement. The forest was quiet again, but the feeling of being watched never left him. He had to find help, but he had no idea where to go. He couldn't stay by the wreck. It was too dangerous. He stood up carefully, moving quietly through the trees. His mind raced, trying to think of a plan. The ship had sent out a distress signal before it crashed, but he had no way of knowing if anyone would receive it. The best he could do was keep moving. He had to find shelter, food, and water. His foot caught on something hidden in the thick underbrush, and he fell forward. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his arm. He groaned, pushing himself up. There was no time to rest. As Lucas looked around again, he noticed something strange. The trees were too perfect, too still. There was no sign of animals, no birds, no insects, no movement at all. It felt wrong. The silence felt too thick, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Lucas saw movement. His heart skipped a beat. A figure appeared through the trees, tall and shadowed. It was unlike anything Lucas had ever seen. The figure was cloaked in dark leather, with armor covering its arms and legs. It moved silently, as if it was part of the forest itself. The figure paused, staring directly at Lucas. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the figure stepped closer. Lucas's body tensed. He was caught. There was no escape. The figure stopped right in front of him. It was a woman, tall and strong, with wild, untamed hair and sharp eyes that seemed to cut through the darkness of the forest. She spoke in a language Lucas didn't understand, but her tone was clear, cold, and commanding. "Who are you?" she asked in a voice that was both fierce and curious. Lucas's mind raced. He didn't know what to say. Was she a friend? An enemy? Was she even human? Before he could answer, the woman stepped closer, studying him with intense eyes. There was no escape now. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to figure out what to do. But the more he looked at her, the more he realized he had no idea what was happening. Then, without warning, the woman grabbed his arm, pulling him up. Lucas struggled, but she was too strong. He was helpless. "Come with me," she commanded. Her grip firmed as she led him deeper into the forest. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that his world had just changed forever. He had crashed on this strange planet, and now he was in the hands of someone who might be his captor or something far worse. The suspense hung thick in the air. Who were these people? And what did they want with him? The answers were just out of reach, but one thing was clear. Lucas wasn't alone anymore. And he had no idea if that was a good thing or not. Asterisk the Amazon warriors. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction as Lucas was pulled deeper into the thick jungle. The woman's grip on his arm was unyielding, her fingers like iron around his wrist. He tried to focus on his surroundings, but everything seemed unfamiliar, unsettling. The trees were too tall, the air too thick, and there was a strange, almost electric tension in the atmosphere. His heart hammered in his chest as they moved through the dense foliage. Lucas stumbled over roots and undergrowth, his mind racing. Who were these people? Why was she taking him? And what did she mean by that cold, commanding voice? The woman didn't speak again, her silence hanging heavy between them. Lucas could feel her eyes on him, assessing him, calculating something. He couldn't quite understand. He glanced sideways at her, but her face was unreadable, focused entirely on the path ahead. She wore dark leather armor, lined with strange markings that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Her posture was regal straight, proud, and fierce, and Lucas couldn't help but feel the weight of her presence. After what felt like hours of walking, they reached a clearing. The trees parted to reveal a large camp, filled with women more of the same fierce, towering figures who seemed to be everywhere in the jungle. They moved with purpose, preparing food, sharpening weapons, and speaking in low, harsh tones. It was a military camp, Lucas realized. This was no ordinary settlement. The warriors were everywhere, and they didn't look friendly. They looked dangerous. The woman holding his arm finally let go, pushing him forward into the center of the camp. Lucas's eyes scanned the scene, his mind still racing. The warriors all turned to look at him, their eyes cold and calculating, sizing him up as if he were some kind of prey. He tried to stand tall, to appear confident, but he could feel the fear creeping in. He had no idea what was about to happen. One of the women stepped forward, taller than the rest, with long black hair that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her eyes were a piercing green, and her expression was both fierce and beautiful. She moved like a predator, every step deliberate, measured. Her armor was more elaborate than the others, adorned with gold and silver symbols that glinted in the firelight. She stopped in front of Lucas, her gaze never leaving his face. "So, the human has finally arrived," she said, her voice smooth and commanding. The words sent a chill through him. Human. She knew what he was, but how? "What do you want from me?" Lucas asked, his voice shaky despite his best efforts to sound strong. The woman smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was sharp, predatory. "We don't want anything from you," she replied coldly. "You are here to serve." "Serve?" Lucas repeated, his confusion growing. "I don't understand. Who are you people?" "We are the Kirana," the woman answered. "We are the protectors of this world, and you are now part of our future. You will be useful to us." Lucas's heart sank. He had no idea what she meant, but it didn't sound good. The woman who had first captured him stepped forward, her expression still unreadable. "He has passed the trials," she said, her voice low. "He will be the one to breed." Lucas's breath caught in his throat. The word breed echoed in his mind. What did that even mean? His mind raced as he tried to understand, but everything felt too strange. The warriors here were nothing like anyone he had ever met. They were strong, fierce, and alien. The woman, with the piercing green eyes, Kira, he guessed, turned to Lucas, her eyes scanning him like a hunter sizing up its prey. "You may be confused now, but soon you will understand your place," she said, her tone a mix of pity and command. "You will help us. You will help save our people." "Save you?" Lucas repeated, trying to make sense of it. "From what?" "Kira's." Expression darkened, her gaze turning cold. "From extinction," she said simply, and with that she turned and walked away, leaving Lucas standing in the middle of the camp, his mind spinning. A few of the warriors stared at him, their eyes burning with something unreadable. Lucas's legs shook, but he stood his ground. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing: he couldn't trust them. He didn't know what kind of people these Kirana were, but they had something planned for him, something he didn't like. Before he could process more, the same woman who had captured him stepped forward again. "Come," she ordered, gesturing for him to follow. Lucas didn't move. "What's happening? Why am I here?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she grabbed his arm again, this time more forcefully. "You will understand soon enough." As they walked, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that his life was no longer his own. The warriors surrounded him, their eyes watching him closely. He felt like a mouse caught in the gaze of 1,000 cats. Every step he took, every move he made, seemed to be under their watchful eyes. There was no escaping them. He had crash-landed on their planet, and now he was their prisoner, part of something far larger, something dangerous, something he had no control over. Asterisk. The royal breeding. The days blurred together after that. Lucas was kept under constant watch by the Kirana. They treated him like something rare, something important. But they also treated him like an animal, a possession. Every movement he made was scrutinized. Every word he spoke weighed carefully. He was given fine clothes, crafted from strange, silken material, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being dressed for a performance. His meals were served in silver bowls, and the warriors looked at him with curiosity, as if he were an object on display. He was kept in a luxurious tent at the heart of their camp, a space unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls of the tent were woven from some kind of glowing plant fiber, and the light inside came from bright, bioluminescent flowers hanging from the ceiling. The air was always warm, heavy with the scent of exotic spices, and soft rugs lined the floor. Despite the beauty of the space, Lucas felt more trapped here than ever before. One afternoon, as he sat on a large cushion, trying to sort through his thoughts, the woman he now knew as Kira entered the tent. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a strange tension in her movements. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was a part of this world, a part of something much bigger than Lucas could understand. "You're ready," she said, her voice firm, yet tinged with something else, something softer. "It's time to learn your role here." "Role?" Lucas repeated, standing quickly. "You still haven't explained what you mean by that." "I came here by accident. I don't belong to you." Kira's eyes flashed with an emotion he couldn't quite name, but she remained calm. "You are not the first human to crash here, but you are the first to be chosen for this." She paused, taking a step closer. "The Kirana are facing extinction. Our bloodlines are dying. The warriors of our kind no longer produce enough heirs to continue our race. You are ... different. We need you." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. "You want me to breed?" He couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. It felt like a nightmare. Kyra's expression didn't falter. "Yes, you will help us survive. You will help us grow stronger again. You are human, but you are now one of us, whether you like it or not." The words hung in the air between them, a heavy silence filling the space. Lucas's mind raced. He wanted to refuse, to shout, to demand answers. But there was something about the way Kira spoke, her quiet authority, the calm confidence in her eyes, that made him hesitate. She wasn't asking. She was telling. "I don't know if I can do this," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kira stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. "You will do it. You will have no choice." She turned away from him, her voice dropping to almost a whisper as she added, "And there is more at stake than you realize. If you fail us, we will die. All of us." Lucas was struck by her words. There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness, only the cold, undeniable truth. He didn't want to be a part of this. He didn't want to be anyone's tool. But the weight of Kira's gaze told him that he didn't have a choice. If he refused, he wasn't sure what would happen to him. The warriors were fierce, and he'd already seen enough to know they didn't tolerate weakness or defiance. Few days passed, and Lucas was shown the breeding chambers, as the Kirana called them. The rooms were filled with soft, glowing lights and strange symbols carved into the walls. It was a far cry from the cold, sterile environment he might have imagined. Everything was carefully designed for comfort, as though the act of breeding itself was something sacred. He learned that the warriors of the Kirana were, in a way, like a matriarchal society. The women held power, and their lineages were everything. The males like Lucas were viewed as a means of sustaining that power. They were tools for the continuation of their people, but they were not treated like slaves. In fact, Lucas was given a place of honor. His title was Royal Breeder, a name that made his skin crawl. It made him feel like something to be used, something to be discarded after his purpose was fulfilled. The worst part? He wasn't the only one. There were other men who had crash-landed on this world before him, each of them now living among the Kirana in silence. They were treated with respect, but their fate was the same. They had become breeders, each chosen to help the Kirana survive, each one part of an ancient ritual that had been passed down through the generations. On one of his rare moments of solitude, Lucas sat by the fire, staring into the flames, his mind filled with dark thoughts. How had he ended up here? A part of him wanted to run, to find some way out. But another part of him, perhaps the part that wanted to survive, knew that running wasn't an option. The sound of footsteps broke through his thoughts. Kira stepped into the tent, her eyes locking with his. "It's time," she said simply. For the first time, Lucas saw something softer in her eyes, something that made him question whether he was truly just a tool to her, or if, in some strange way, she too was trapped in this world. But he didn't have time to dwell on it. His destiny, whether he wanted it or not, was already set. Fighting back. The days seemed to stretch endlessly as Lucas adjusted to his new life under the watchful eyes of the Kirana. His role as a royal breeder had become a suffocating reality. Each morning, the warriors would come to check on him, making sure he was in good health, as if his body were some kind of prized possession. The rest of the time, he was left alone in his tent, with only his thoughts and the heavy silence to keep him company. But the silence weighed heavily on him. In the quiet moments, Lucas felt his spirit erode, piece by piece. He had always been a survivor. He'd grown up on harsh Earth colonies, where survival meant everything. He wasn't used to being at the mercy of others, and the longer he stayed in this alien world, the more he felt a growing anger within him. He wasn't just going to lie down and let them use him. Not without a fight. One day, as he was pacing the inside of his tent, his mind racing with ideas of escape, he heard a noise outside, footsteps. But these weren't the heavy, purposeful steps of the warriors. No, these were lighter, quicker. Someone was sneaking around. His heart skipped a beat. Was it Kira, checking on him again? Or something else? He stood still, listening, waiting. The footsteps grew louder, closer. And then, suddenly, the flap of his tent was pulled aside, and a figure slipped inside. Lucas froze. It was Kira, but she wasn't alone. A young woman, dressed in plain leather armor, stepped into the tent behind her. Her face was partially hidden beneath a hood, but her eyes shone with a strange intensity. This wasn't a routine check. This was something else. Kira stepped forward, closing the flap behind her, her expression more serious than Lucas had ever seen it. "We need to talk," she said quietly, her voice not unkind, but laced with urgency. Lucas stared at her, confused. "Talk? What do you mean? I've been locked in here for days. What else could you possibly need from me?" Kira gave him a look, one that was almost apologetic. "It's not what you think. We've been watching you. We know you don't belong here. You want to escape. You want to leave. But you can't. Not yet. What are you talking about?" Lucas's voice was sharp, his frustration bubbling over. "You keep saying I have no choice, but I do. I can fight. I can escape." The woman behind Kira stepped forward then, pulling back her hood. She was a warrior like the others, but there was something different about her, something softer in her eyes, a look that spoke of understanding. "My name is Lycia," she said softly, "and I know what you're feeling. We've all been there. We're not all in favor of what's happening here, but there are forces at play that you don't understand. The Kirana aren't just protecting their bloodlines. They're trying to survive. They're running out of time." Lucas frowned. "Survive? By using me as a breeder?" Kira's eyes darkened, and she looked away for a moment before meeting his gaze again. "The Kirana are a proud people, Lucas. We do not take such actions lightly. But our numbers are dwindling. We need you to help us rebuild. You are part of our future now." Lucas shook his head, his anger flaring. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't come here to be used by you or anyone else. I have my own life, my own future." Lycia stepped closer to him, her voice low. "And that's why we're here, to help you understand. You're not alone in this. There are others who feel the same way. You're not the only one who wants to fight back. The Kirana are powerful, yes, but they're not invincible. And neither are their leaders." Lucas's eyes widened as he listened. There was a subtle hint of rebellion in Lycia's words, a hint of hope that Lucas had long since given up on. Could it be true? Could there really be a way to escape this fate? Kira nodded, as if reading his thoughts. "We need to make a plan. If we wait too long, we'll lose the chance. The warriors here are divided. Some want to keep things as they are. Others want change. You could help us. You could be the key." "Change?" Lucas repeated, trying to wrap his head around it. "What kind of change?" Lycia's eyes grew even more intense. "We want to overthrow the leadership. We want to create a future where the Kirana aren't just surviving, they're thriving. Where we don't have to use humans to breed just to keep our bloodlines going." The words hit Lucas like a bolt of lightning. The Kirana weren't just trying to control him. They were part of a larger, more dangerous system. And now he was caught in the middle of it. "But what does this have to do with me?" he asked, still struggling to understand. Kira finally spoke again, her voice quieter, more serious. "We need your help to gain the support of the people, to show them that there's another way, that they don't need to keep breeding in secret, that there's a future where we can fight, not just survive." Lucas's mind raced. It wasn't just about escape anymore. It wasn't just about his own freedom. He was in the middle of something far bigger than himself. A rebellion. A fight for the future of the Kirana. And maybe, just maybe, his place in it could make a difference. He looked at Kira and Lycia, the weight of their words sinking in. For the first time since his crash, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way out. Maybe there was a chance to fight back. You want me to help you start a revolution? Lucas asked, a small smirk creeping onto his lips. Lycia smiled back, her expression fierce. We don't just want you to help. We need you to lead. Asterisk, the escape plan. The idea of leading a rebellion seemed impossible, like a dream too far out. Of reach, Lucas couldn't help but feel like he was out of his depth. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this might be his only shot at freedom, not just for himself, but for all the others trapped on this planet. Lycia and Kira had laid the foundation. They'd told him everything. How the Kirana warriors were divided, how there were factions of the warriors who wanted change, and how the current leaders were corrupt and selfish. But the most important part, the part that haunted Lucas, was the fact that he was the key to starting it all. The rebels wanted him to lead them, to become the symbol of hope and resistance. For the first time in days, Lucas allowed himself a moment of clarity. He wasn't just some powerless prisoner anymore. He had a choice to make, and his choice would determine the future of this entire planet. But how was he supposed to lead these people? He was still an outsider, a human in a world that was nothing like his own. He didn't know their ways, their customs, or even how their society worked. How could he possibly fight against the warriors who had trained their entire lives for this kind of combat? The tent was dark now, the soft glow of bioluminescent plants casting strange shadows on the walls. Lucas sat in the center, his legs crossed beneath him, his head spinning with ideas. He had to do something. There was no way he was going to sit back and watch this planet continue its downward spiral. I'm not a leader, he muttered to himself, frustrated. I'm just a guy who crashed here by accident. I'm not meant for this. You're more than just an accident. Kira's voice broke through the silence. She entered the tent without warning, her presence both calm and unnerving. You've been given a purpose, Lucas. It's not something you can run from. He looked up, startled by her sudden appearance. Kira wasn't the type to give comfort, but her words struck a chord. There was something in her eyes now, something that spoke of respect, even if she didn't fully understand him. You may not see it yet, but you are a leader. You have something the Kirana need, a vision, a way to unite our people, Kira continued, sitting down across from him. The warriors follow strength, but they follow even more when they believe in a cause. Your cause is survival. You're the one who can make them see that. Lucas leaned forward, rubbing his hands together. But I don't know how to start a revolution. I don't know how to lead a group of people who don't even know me. And what about the ones who don't want change? What do I do then? Kira smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was a knowing one. You don't have to do it alone. Lycia and others like her will help you. We've been waiting for someone to stand up and lead us. And if you hesitate now, all of us will suffer for it. Lucas's heart sank. She was right. Every day he waited, the Kirana's hold on him and the others grew tighter. The leaders were only growing more powerful, more ruthless. The time for action was now, but there was still so much Lucas didn't know. He didn't even know who he could trust. There were whispers of factions within the warriors, the rebels, and the loyalists. How could he be sure that the people who claimed to want change weren't just playing him? Before he could voice his doubts, Lycia entered the tent, her expression serious but urgent. It's time, she said, her voice low. The leadership is about to meet. We can't wait any longer. Lucas stood up quickly, his pulse racing. The plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the leadership meeting, make contact with the loyalists who supported the rebellion, and rally the warriors to their cause. It was a risky move, but it was the only one they had left. Are you sure about this? Lucas asked, looking between Kira and Lycia. Once we go in, there's no turning back. We can't afford to fail. Kira nodded, her gaze unwavering. We know the risks. But we also know that if we don't act now, the Kirana will never change. We'll be nothing but tools for their survival. And if we wait too long, there won't be anyone left to fight. Lucas swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing. On him, he had no experience with politics, with rebellion. But he had something that the Kirana didn't, the heart of a human who had survived impossible odds. It was all he had left. "I'll do it," Lucas said finally, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Let's make them see. Let's show them what humanity is capable of." Lycia smiled for the first time, the hope in her eyes shining. "Through. We'll start with the leadership meeting. You'll meet the people who can change everything." The time for hesitations was over. Lucas was no longer just a prisoner on a strange planet. He was part of something bigger, a fight for the freedom of the Kirana, a fight for their future. And as he stepped out of the tent, ready to face whatever came next, he realized that perhaps this was the very thing he had been searching for all along. Asterisk, the final choice. The air outside the tent was thick with tension. As the rebellion took shape around Lucas, the weight of his newfound responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. Every move he made seemed to echo in the hearts of the Kirana warriors who had joined his cause. Yet, despite the growing support, Lucas couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were walking a razor's edge. This was no longer just about surviving. It was about everything. Lycia and Kira had worked quickly, organizing the rebels in secret. They had to move swiftly before the loyalists in the Kirana leadership caught wind of their plans. If they succeeded, they could topple the corrupt power that had kept the warriors in chains. But if they failed, the rebellion would be crushed before it ever truly began. And Lucas, he would be seen as a traitor, an enemy to all of them. It was a risky move, but it was all they had. The leadership meeting was set for the following evening, a time when the ruling faction of the Kirana gathered to discuss the planet's future. It was here, in the heart of their power, that Lucas would make his stand. But it wasn't just about presenting an idea. It was about showing the warriors that they could have a choice. They could choose their own future, one not dictated by ancient traditions that had enslaved them to a cycle of survival. Lucas and his small band of rebels moved under cover of darkness, slipping through the shadows of the warrior camp like phantoms. The forest surrounding the meeting hall was eerily silent, the only sound the soft rustle of the trees swaying in the breeze. It felt as though the very planet was holding its breath. Lycia, with her quick movements and quiet demeanor, led the way. She was the one who knew the layout of the Kirana's stronghold, and she had planned every detail of their infiltration. Kira, ever watchful and sharp, took the rear, ensuring that no one would follow them unnoticed. Lucas was in the middle, unsure but determined. They reached the grand hall, a towering structure built from ancient stone, decorated with the same glowing symbols Lucas had seen in the breeding chambers. The entrance was guarded by a handful of warriors, their eyes scanning the darkened path. This was the final hurdle. If they could get inside without raising alarms, they could strike a blow for the future of the Kira. Kira gave him a brief nod, signaling that it was time. The rebels moved quickly, surrounding the guards. Before they could even react, Lycia and Kira had them subdued. The fight was over in seconds, swift and silent. The rebels had been trained well. They weren't going to let anything stop them now. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest as he approached the entrance. The massive doors looming before him. The last time he'd been inside this hall, he had been a prisoner, a pawn in a game he didn't understand. But now, the tables had turned. Now, he was leading the charge. Lycia stepped forward, placing her hand on the door. It creaked open slowly, the heavy wood groaning under the weight of what was about to happen. The rebels filed inside, taking positions along the walls. The meeting hall was filled with the most powerful of the Kirana warriors, leaders of the factions, their eyes cold and calculating. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a raised platform, were the high-ranking officials of the Kirana leadership, including the High Commander, the woman who had once seen Lucas as nothing more than a tool. The High Commander stood as they entered, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of the rebels. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Lucas stepped forward, his heart thundering in his chest. "This is the future of the Kirana," he said, his voice firm despite the fear that gripped him. "A future where we no longer live by the rules of survival. A future where we have a choice." The room was silent. The warriors on the platform exchanged looks, their expressions unreadable. Some of them seemed to be listening, while others bristled with anger. The High Commander's gaze turned to Lucas, her eyes sharp with disdain. "You think you can change centuries of tradition?" she asked, her tone filled with mockery. "You, a human, who has no place in our world." Lucas held his ground. "I am here because you forced me to be. But I am not alone anymore. The Kirana are not just warriors, they are people. And you, the so-called leaders, have forgotten that. You've used us, manipulated us, all for your own survival. But no more." A tense silence hung in the air. Then, to Lucas's surprise, one of the warriors on the platform stood up, a tall, muscular woman who had been watching him from the moment he entered. Her name was Tessa, and she was a well-respected leader among the rebels. "I stand with him," she declared, her voice clear and strong. "The time for change has come. We will no longer live in fear. We will no longer bow to the old ways." Another warrior stepped forward, then another, until the entire hall was filled with murmurs of agreement. The rebels had made their stand. They weren't backing down. The High Commander's face twisted with rage. "You betray your people," she hissed, her hand reaching for the weapon at her side. "You will regret this." But before she could make a move, Tessa stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "It's too late for regret. The Kirana have spoken. The future belongs to us now." Lucas stood, feeling the weight of their choice bearing down on him. This was it. This was the moment that would determine the fate of the Kirana. There was no turning back. The future had been decided, and in that moment, Lucas realized that, despite everything, he had made the right choice. For the first time since crashing on this planet, he felt a spark of hope. Asterisk.